Next item.
Item 6B, receive first quarter financial update report for fiscal year 2019-20 as of September 30th, 2019, and adopt a resolution approving the carryover of fiscal year 2018-19 purchase order encumbrances and budget amendments.
Finance Director.
All right, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Tonight I'll be providing an overview of the city's financial projection as of the end of quarter one of fiscal year 19-20. So the objective of this presentation is to receive the first quarter financial update report as of the end of September 30th, 2019, and then also to adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 19-20 operating and capital improvement budget by approving the carryover fiscal year 18-19 purchase order encumbrances and budget amendments, which is an action item required this evening. The agenda for this evening's presentation is to provide an overview of the Q1 projection, which will include the general fund, the enterprise funds, and the internal service funds, a summary of the purchase order encumbrances carryforwards, a summary of the budget amendments, and the request to council. The city's current fiscal year begins on July 1st of 2019 and it ends on June 30th of 2020. Staff prepares financial update reports at the end of each fiscal quarter. This evening I'll be presenting data through the end of September 30th, 2019. And staff will plan to come back to council in January to provide an update as of the end of quarter two, and then again in April to provide an update at the end of quarter three. In quarter four, the update will be done in conjunction with the city's fiscal year-end processing when we produce the city's comprehensive annual financial report, or the CAFR, which takes much more time to complete, and that presentation is scheduled for January as well. This slide here shows a very high-level overview of the fiscal year 19-20 revenue and expenditure budget in the general fund. The City Council adopted a balanced budget with the use of $325,000 of fund balance in the current fiscal year, which is much less than the $1.7 million fund balance that was required to balance the budget back in fiscal year 18-19. The fiscal year 19-20 budget meets all requirements identified in the city's reserve policy with $1.5 million fund balance in the general fund, 25% or $12.7 million of general fund expenditures set aside in the reserve fund, and $3 million of reserves to be used in the event of an emergency. The revenue pie chart on the left shows the proportional share of the major revenue sources in the general fund, with property taxes, sales taxes being the most significant sources. The expenditure pie chart on the right shows the major city functions the general fund goes to fund. As you can see, a majority of the general fund sources go to pay for the public safety functions of the city, police and fire. And just a reminder that these pie charts are only for the general fund. The city does receive revenue and funds critical operational and capital functions in the city's enterprise funds as well, which are not depicted here on these pie charts. I'd like to provide an overview of the revenues through the end of quarter one compared to the adopted budget and compared to quarter one at the end of last fiscal year. As you can see, the revenues are about 15%, which is very similar to where the city was at the end of Q1 last fiscal year as well. Property tax, the city receives a majority of property tax revenues in December and in April as the county processes the property tax rolls. And you can see the property tax is up a little bit from some one-time educational revenue augmentation fund related property tax payments that did come in already this fiscal year. Sales tax revenue is budgeted to be slightly above last year, and revenues are slightly behind where we were last year at this time, primarily due to some timing differences from the state in a delay of many of their tax filings from a major system implementation they had, distributing tax revenues statewide. There's no reason to think that our sales tax revenue won't come in on budget by the end of the fiscal year. Hotel occupancy tax revenue is budgeted to be slightly higher than last year and is on track. VLF, or the vehicle license fee, Those fee revenues, those revenues do come in at the same time as property tax revenues, which is why we don't yet have the revenue in place. Business taxes are due primarily at the beginning of the fiscal year for the city's annual business tax renewal process. You'll see some minor increases in business tax revenue with some redirecting of staff really supporting that effort and supporting some of the audit work currently underway as well. Departmental revenues through the end of Q1 are slightly higher in police and the planning department, primarily from some of their permitting activities. On the building division side, though, however, they are experiencing some lower fee revenue in Q1 in the first quarter of this year compared to last year. Staff is closely monitoring the division's revenue for any seasonal fluctuations and permit revenue, which is very difficult to predict. So staff will be closely monitoring that throughout the fiscal year. Just to provide a really brief overview of the expenditure.
Just a quick question before we move any further. For the card room tax, is there a explanation why it's almost half?
It's almost half. I believe the card room tax, in Q1 of last fiscal year, through the end of Q1, it represented 2 payments. And so I believe those payments come in quarterly. And so there was a minor timing issue where last fiscal year we got the second quarter payment a little bit earlier. And so it was reflected in the Q1 report. So on slide 8 here, providing an overview of the expenditures through the end of Q1 compared to last year at this time. Q1 expenditures are at 30% of the total budget, which is exactly the same at this time last fiscal year. First quarter expenditures were $15.5 million of the total budget, and all departments are within an acceptable range as of the end of this quarter at this time. It's important to note here that the first quarter expenditures are typically higher than a run rate. You'd expect a run rate to be around 25%. Due to the city choosing to take advantage of the CalPERS prepayment option for both the safety and the miscellaneous plans, the city's annual cost for the unfunded accrued liability for CalPERS employment retirement of approximately $6 million, and that was budgeted in the fiscal year 19-20 budget. The city chooses to take advantage of this prepayment option as opposed to making installment payments throughout the year, as it minimizes the overall costs. We don't have to make installment payments, which actually costs a little bit more for the city over time. So we choose to prepay that at the beginning of the year.
And Keith, before you move on, I want to point out to council that the prior slide, we had about 15% of the revenue for the year. And on this slide, we've spent about 30% of the revenue. And that is connecting back to our prior conversation about how the revenue comes in and sometimes odd cycles just because of when people pay property tax and when things are remitted. And so we're in that point of the year where making sure that our investments are liquid and making sure that we can use pooled cash to pay some of our expenses that we're incurring in this first quarter, because we won't get the revenue for that until later on in the year. And so I just want to this is a nice point to point that out connected to the prior conversation.
Okay, so this slide shows a summary of the revenues and expenditures for the city's 4 enterprise funds. The water and the wastewater enterprises shows their revenues for the first quarter coming in as expected. They include 3 months of service charges for utility customers from the 5-year rate plan, which was adopted by the City Council back in May of 2017. Again, all those rate increases were budgeted as part of the annual budget process. In the City Net Services or the cable department, the revenues are coming in fairly consistently as last fiscal year at this time. The budget for the current fiscal year was reduced by a little over $1 million based on recent year's activities and the cable enterprise doing a number of things to review many of their long-standing contractual obligations, for example, seeing where they can renegotiate, looking for opportunities to reduce expenses. And cable is projected to end the year with a balanced budget at this point in time. And then finally, the stormwater enterprise. The fees come in as a special assessment also related to the property tax billing cycle. So fee revenue for stormwater don't come in until December and in April in conjunction with property tax payments as well. This slide here shows a summary of the revenues and expenditures of the city's 4 internal service funds. These funds operate more like a typical business, and they exclusively support the city's internal operations. Charges for each of these internal service funds, like central garage, building and facilities, the city's self-insurance fund, and the technology department, those funds are receive their revenue, their charges for services on a monthly allocation based on the adopted budget, which are basically paid for by the different city departments that require their support over the year. You'll see that the self-insurance fund has some higher expenditures during Q1, and that's planned, and that's due to upfront payments for premiums that cover the entire fiscal year. And again, all the activity that staff is currently seeing in these internal service funds it appears normal and consistent with the adopted budget at this time. So I know I just covered a number of slides with a lot of numbers. So I just wanted to sort of boil it down with some key takeaways that staff have at this time through Q1. The general fund revenues largely are coming in as expected. Staff, as I mentioned earlier, will be closely monitoring the building division particularly to review any seasonal fluctuations and permit activity to make sure that the budget is intact. And with only 3 months of actual revenues to date, it is difficult to determine if there may be some revenue issues in building at this time. So it will just require some close monitoring through the fiscal year. Expenditure run rates are within normal expected ranges, again within the budget. And the enterprise and internal service fund activities, again, are normal and within acceptable ranges. So those are the key takeaways that staff have at this time. So moving on to purchase order encumbrances. This table lists the total amount of outstanding encumbrances as of the end of last fiscal year, as of June 30th, 2019. And staff are asking that the council adopt a resolution to reappropriate these encumbrances into the current fiscal year 1920, to ensure that previously authorized funds are available in the current fiscal year to cover expenditures for multi-year projects and continuing obligations. This is a routine annual request that staff request of council at this point in time each fiscal year. And it's related to purchase orders where we might have a multi-year arrangement or an agreement with a contractor or a vendor, and we appropriate that money up front, and we know that work is going to span multiple fiscal years, and so we want to carry forward that purchase order and that encumbrance into the next fiscal year to be able to continue with that work. Finance has worked closely with staff to review these purchase orders, and that all of these projects are in progress and still being worked on. This table here lists a number of budget amendments that staff are requesting of council at this time, and I'll provide a very brief overview of each. So item A is in regards to the fiscal sustainability project, which again was launched a little over a year ago now, as I mentioned earlier. And the goal of this project is to assess fiscal challenges, identify strategies, and implement a wide range of actions to resolve structural deficit issues. Several activities have been completed, including a high-level assessment of the general fund fiscal challenges, the development of a cable enterprise business plan, a revenue enhancement measure, a local sales tax measure, Measure G, the establishment of a comprehensive development impact fee program, implementing budgetary and expenditure controls, and modernizing the city's utility billing practices. There are a number of efforts that are currently underway, such as auditing the city's major revenue sources for property, sales tax, transient occupancy tax, and business license tax, and also working on a short-term rental ordinance. The next phase of this project is before you this evening, requesting $150,000 allocated for various operational assessments and strategy analyses, which may include a citywide fleet study, a citywide facilities assessment, a downtown parking meter program analysis, and a stormwater funding assessment. Item B is in regards to the Affordable Housing Fund implementation plan. Currently, the city has approximately $3.8 million in the city's Affordable Housing in Lieu Fund. This fund was established nearly 11 years ago, and it applies for residential and non-residential development projects. And staff is requesting the City Council to appropriate $70,000 from that fund to hire a consulting firm to conduct research and develop a plan and implementation alternatives, including policy options and funding opportunities for the programming of the funds in the future. And the implementation plan would help to ensure the funds are programmed effectively. Item C on this list is the transit improvements in regards to the county Measure W. In 2018, the voters in San Mateo County passed Measure W to provide the county with additional resources through a half-cent sales tax increase to improve transit and relieve traffic congestion. The sales tax increase took effect in July of 2019, and it includes funds for highway projects, local street repair, and many similar types of projects. The City of San Bruno's annual allocation is just over $452,000. Staff is requesting that a new fund be created for the tracking purposes of the revenues and expenditures from this measure, and staff will come back to council at a later time requesting the expenditure appropriation of how those funds are to be used, either at a subsequent meeting or during the upcoming budget cycle. Item D is the well rehabilitation project for well 16. Staff is requesting an additional $275,000 be appropriated to the well for the removal and replacement of various valves, pneumatic operators, flow meters, and other electrical work that are required to address immediate issues that the well is currently experiencing. Item E is in regards to a grant that the library recently received, awarded for the Library Services and Technology Act grant for modern technology related to the purchase of computer equipment and supplies and technology instructors in the amount of $47,250. And the grant funds will be used to teach 6 hands-on digital literacy classes at the public library. Item F is in regards to satellite phones that were included in the fiscal year 1920 adopted budget as an enhancement request that council adopted. And staff is requesting the approval of an additional $3,000 of the asset forfeiture fund to complete the purchase of those phones. And then finally, item G, the police department is requesting to purchase a license plate reader system to support parking enforcement efforts by digitally chalking vehicles, reducing the need for a community service officer to get out of their vehicle and physically chalk a violating vehicle. The vehicles would be chalked virtually, and it would reduce any physical strain on the officer, increase officer safety, it potentially reduce cheating by violators, and improve enforcement efficiency. After the first year, there will be an annual maintenance charge that would be incorporated in the police department's operating budget beginning in fiscal year 2021 and going forward. What's not on this chart, but in the staff report, is a list of a few vehicle changes that the police department is also requesting. Again, those are described in the staff report. So my request to council this evening is to receive the first quarter financial update report as of the end of September 30th, and then adopt a resolution amending the fiscal year 1920 operating and capital improvement budget by approving the carryover from prior fiscal year purchase order encumbrances, and also approve of the requested budget amendments before you this evening. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Questions, comments from council? Michael? Give me a second.
1 sec, right.
Marty? Your light's on. Did you have any?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's all right. Michael?
In general, everything sounds good, and definitely appreciate all the effort that went into this. The only thing for the budget amendments, I wanted some more time to kind of go through what those are and how they impact the overall budget that we have approved so far. And I didn't really have enough time to really sift through that. So I'd be willing to approve the remainder of this going forward, but ask for that maybe just that portion on the changes be brought back at the next meeting if my colleagues here concur on that. Just I was wanted a little bit more time to understand the impact of all those and why they're being requested. So that would
Manager,
be my
Director.
only request.
Is that for every fund or for one fund in particular?
Just across the board.
Okay.
Please. Well,
Exclude the grant.
we could exclude the grant. That's neutral. That's-
The water fund comes out of enterprise funds for other than general
okay.
fund projects?
I can agree to that.
So what I'm hearing from council and staff, is general fund specific, is that
So
correct?
the only thing that's general fund is the first one. There is the asset forfeiture, the grant, the equipment revolving fund for the license plate reader, Measure W water fund, and then the in lieu fund. So are there anything council wants to approve tonight and then we bring back for further discussion, or the entire lot?
So obviously the Measure W is income from,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for road repairs and other-
just revenue.
Right.
I'm more concerned about the expenditures and,
Can you pull them through the item numbers or item letters?
To the chair?
police, Marty.
So other than A,
Yes,
everything else approved?
the 150.
yeah. You want just that one?
Okay. Yeah, if the rest of the council is in agreement, I could go along with that. I didn't feel like I had enough time to go through all of it, but if the rest of the council is okay with moving forward with them, I mean, it was a request. I just wanted a little bit more time to digest all
So-
the details. There was a lot of information in there, so.
Okay, so are we down to the item A for the general fund for 150,000, is that, or did you want more than that?
Well, I mean,
For the amendments.
It's up to the rest of the council and how comfortable they are with approving the rest of it. It's just, I don't know, I'm kind of sensitive to the fact that we put a lot of effort initially into getting ourselves into a good place, and I just want to make sure that we're not overextending ourselves. So just for my own personal comfort level, I wanted a little bit more time, but,
Right, and I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Personally, so that's why I'm just trying to quantify, because obviously I would think C is not necessary, E is not necessary.
Right.
So was there something other than A that you'd like more opportunity?
no, actually, if we could, well, maybe A and G, the
A and
equipment
G.
revolving fund.
Okay, 'cause that's the one that goes into the.
Right.
Okay.
Staff?
As the council wishes.
Okay, so Councilman Salzer, you're asking for A and G to, and then approve B, C, D, E, and F as far as budget amendments.
As far as amendments, correct.
Okay. So that's been proposed by our colleague, is if the council is good, can the resolution be introduced if that's what the council chooses with those two exceptions? Okay, what's the pleasure of the council? Unless there were other questions, of course, please, I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
No? No,
All right.
okay.
Well, thank you.
Want to introduce it?
Sure. I will make a motion. Let's see, we have a few different things here, right? So we have to, we need a,
The resolution approving the carryovers of 1819, purchase order encumbrances, and the budget amendments minus A and G. Would that be acceptable?
no. Okay.
Okay, you did it.
Michael, is that okay?
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
And staff, would we, thinking that would come back on the 26th? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
And I'll be ready to approve it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your reports.